Welcome back to In Pursuit of Magic, where we explore the things that inspire us, connect us, and the magic we find along the way. I'm Matthew Medina, and today's very special guest is a talented, award-winning voice in American musical theater, composer Stephen Weiner. Stephen has created memorable scores for a wide range of musicals, including Iron Curtain, The Honeymooners, Once Upon a Time in New Jersey, and the hit revue Newyorkers. His work has earned prestigious recognition, such as the Richard Rodgers Award, the Jonathan Larson Grant, and IT Awards for Outstanding Original Music. Most recently, he's worked on Monte Cristo. His music is best known for its wit, heart, and strong theatrical storytelling, whether he's bringing classic stories to life or capturing the spirit of the city. Stephen, thank you so much for being here. Just looking at your resume of work, it's not only very impressive, but it's very clear that you have a lot of heart and passion for what you do.
Thank you. Yes. Um, you have to have a lot of heart and passion to stay in this industry. And I love it very, very much. And it's been a lifelong passion and continues to be so.
And it definitely shows. And, it makes me curious then, what was your first inspirations that made you want to jump into the world of musical theater?
Yeah, yeah. Um, so uh we grew up in in a very modest two-bedroom garden apartment. One could say we were poor. And my dad was a physicist that was recruited by a patent law firm. And so they sent him to law school at night. And he used to study on the weekends on an old rickety bridge table. And I would play very quietly. I was allowed to play very quietly while he studied. Um, and we had this Grundig high fidelity, old, huge Grundig high fidelity that had a spool to spool tape recorder. And he would listen to My Fair Lady, The King and I, South Pacific, The Pajama Game, Damn Yankees, um, all of these phenomenal golden era shows that I listened to, right? I listened to them. So that music started going through me. On the other side, my mother was born and raised in Brussels, Belgium. And so what she brought was all the French music. So my first records were French nursery rhymes and Piaf, Edith Piaf, Jacques Brel, um, this musical group called Les Compagnons de la Chanson, which they were this incredible singing group that had the most glorious, beautiful music you've ever heard. So I was drenched in melody, so that by the age of 3, 4, 5, that that was my influence. And for me, melody has always been the North Star. You have to have melody. I don't care what medium you're writing in, but you have to have melody. And that's kind of what launched me. And when I was 3, um, it must have been for Hanukkah, but I confused it with Christmas because Hanukkah and Christmas fell,
Same
similarly.
time.
I got a baby piano and I sat down and I played Mary Had a Little Lamb with both hands. So that's kind of how it started. And then when I was 6, I wrote my first musical. Um, and and then I would write my own shows, throughout my childhood and adolescence. And and that's kind of how it started. So I think I answered the question.
Yeah, it's incredible just to know that being immersed in so much of that music and atmosphere can have such a profound effect. And it's clear it carried with you at such a young age where you were just picking up skills and you were just understanding
Yeah,
melody and getting to create your own
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. And just intuitively understanding the arc of a song, the arc of emotion and how it makes one feel. I really didn't see my first Broadway show until I was 12. And on my 12th birthday, my parents and my brother and I went to New York, and it was a frigid, frigid, cold night. It was so cold. And so my dad at one point, and I always remember, we were walking towards the St. James Theater, and he said, "Let's go into this theater and warm up." So we're in the lobby and we're warming up. And I finally said, like an idiot, "Well, okay, we're warm. Let's go again." And then, of course, my brother turned to me and said, "You idiot, we're staying. We're seeing a show." And it was Hello, Dolly with Ginger Rogers, which is so ironic because my daughter Marla is now the headlining the St. James Theater. And when I walked into that theater, um, for opening night, it sent chills down my spine because this is truly the circle of life for me and for our family. And I told that story to Mar, and it was a very special moment.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
it's so funny how life works that way. I mean, between that moment with the theater, but also just your experience with being so immersed in things and then you diving into this world and history repeating. So
yeah,
it goes to
history
show.
repeating. And by the way, I didn't understand a thing about Hello Doll. I did not understand the show at all. It was like, "Woo," but but the sets, the costumes, the Broadway experience was just sheer magic. My mouth was open because up to then I was just used to hearing, you know, everything on this lousy either Grundig, high fidelity thing that we had or tapes. And then all of a sudden I hear a 26-piece orchestra blaring the overture of Hello, Dolly. And it was like, oh, I get it. I get it now. I got it. Okay. This is great.
It's such a magical moment when it all comes together. And I feel like
Yeah.
live theater is just so powerful in and of itself because there's
Yeah.
an energy in the room. And,
It
the
is.
process also, you've been part of the process for so many shows, but you have such a beautiful perspective on being resilient and the concept of rejection, which can be really difficult in a creative industry because you feel so emotionally tied to what you're doing and what you're creating. And a lot of times you're putting yourself
Yeah.
in it. And so I really agreed with it. And also your take on how ghosting people is kind of the hardest hit you can take sometimes because you can't kind of wrap your head around how hard it is to just say, this isn't for me or I can't really do this. And I feel like that kind of dehumanizes people also in that experience. And so whether it's a no or a closed door or no response at all, how have you
Yeah.
learned to manage those moments and taught yourself how to reject rejection?
Yeah. Um, well, look, I'm not going to say any of this is easy, right? Just because it might be a principle that I try to adhere to, but there can certainly be emotional slippage sometimes. Um, I'll tell you, just recently with Monte Cristo, I was having drinks with somebody who came to see the show and was possibly interested in helping us in some way, and then I never heard from him again. It's okay to say, "Hey, really enjoyed, thank you. It was nice to meet you, but this isn't for me." And this ghosting thing that happens, and I'm not sure if it happens in other industries as much as it happens here. Um, but but we our industry lacks a certain etiquette in getting back to people, and I wish that we could do better. And I understand. I try, put yourself in their shoes. They're getting hundreds and hundreds of shows and hundreds of invites to readings, and and I get it, right? But there has to be a way to do better because there are so many writers like me who we just want that acknowledgement. Otherwise, it does can become dehumanizing. But at some point, in order to stay sane, you need to say to yourself, look, just reject rejection and just say, okay, they missed an opportunity, but there are other opportunities. And you go towards the light and go towards other opportunities and reframe it as just that you have to reject rejection. Because if you let it get to you, you'll never write again. And I've spoken to some of the biggest composers and folks in the industry, and we've all been stung, and the hurt stays with you sometimes. But you got to keep on going. You just got to keep on going, and you got to pick yourself up, and you got to say to yourself, I'm going to reject this rejection, and I'm just going to, believe in me and believe in what I do. And it's hard to do sometimes, but you got to do it. And, you know, that's that's something that you also learn over time. You learn that over time. You learn you learn that it's just kind of part of the business, and it's something that writers go through and actors go through. And it's almost a skill. It's a muscle that you have to develop. And so that's kind of where I'm at with it right now. But I'm not going to tell you it hurts sometimes. And the ghosting thing is, in my mind, seems to have gotten worse rather than better. And you would think that with technology and email and just sending something, it could be easier, but it seems to have gotten worse. I'm not sure why that is. And I think it could be that social media in general can be a dehumanizing technology. And I think that's what might be happening.
Yeah, and it's a process. I feel like even when you start to get good at managing those moments, there's going to be other moments that maybe feel harder. And, I've definitely been
Hmm.
through it, and I experienced kind of both extremes of responses, whether it's
Hmm.
no response or a very quick, uh, no thanks, we're going to pass, to a very kind, it's like, hey, thank you so much for reaching out. This sounds great, but
Hmm.
they're busy right now. But, keep us in mind for the future, or thank you for thinking of us. And I always appreciate those responses because they didn't have to write that. They didn't have to take the
That's
time to
right.
do a response. And I feel like it
That's
was
right.
very professional. It was very kind. And I always make
That's
sure to
right.
respond to that with, thank you so much for responding to me. Wish you all the best, etc.
Exactly. Exactly. And look, I'm not saying anything new, and this has been a harbinger of our industry, both in theater and movies, and it just comes with the territory. So I think saying to yourself, I'm going to reject that rejection and just move on. Um, and by the way, very, very rarely people have gotten back to me with some specifics of why they're passing. That's glorious because now you're hearing from real pros who may be giving you some really helpful feedback, right? And that's fantastic, right? So I'll take that rejection, with a bow on it, because I'm learning from it. But, you know, that's what it is, and it just comes with the territory. So I think it's really, really important to be resilient and to kind of stay centered and stay with who you are and what you believe in terms of your talent.
I
So,
think that's an important lesson too. And I think that could be very difficult. I mean, my own experience with this podcast was it was a slightly different podcast, but similar idea. And I was actually working with someone who is in the industry. We were co-hosting, had filmed a couple of episodes, but they were getting increasingly busy. But kept saying, no, 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 it's fine. Like I'm invested in this. And I was like, okay. And then one day they just disappeared. And I had to decide whether to restart this on my own, which was very nerve-wracking, or to just stop. And it took me a while. Um, but I did believe in what I wanted to do with this and having people on. And I'm very
yeah,
grateful to people like you who believe in this space to talk about these
yeah.
things.
It's interesting. Your story triggered a story that I have, which is at one point in the BMI workshop when I was in the advanced workshop. Um, and probably people listening to this may or may not know. So really quickly, BMI, ASCAP, they're the two royalty collection houses that, collect royalties for composers and lyricists. And BMI started a musical theater workshop to basically assist promising composers and lyricists and teach them the craft, if you will, of writing for musical theater. Is led by moderators who are either very experienced or really masters of the craft. And it's been around since the 60s, and it's kind of a very venerated workshop. And I'm very proud that I was in it. But at some point, I just kind of dried up. I hit a wall, and I was trying to work with different collaborators, nothing was working. I was kind of at this dead end, and I literally hit a wall. And one day I picked up a pen and I started writing my own lyrics. So I was actually um, admitted into the BMI musical theater workshop as a composer lyricist. But then I realized fairly early on, hey, there are people that are really much better at writing lyrics than I am. So maybe I'll kind of, what's the word? Let that go, that piece of me go for now, and try working with other people. And then when I hit this wall, I started writing my own lyrics again, and I got kudos for it, and it kind of reignited me, and it it opened a lot of different and interesting new doors for me, and so that's the other thing about, when you hit that wall, do do the unexpected, take the risk, do something that you normally wouldn't do, right? This is years after giving up lyric writing. And when I approached it at the time, Maury Yeston was the moderator of the BMI workshop. Just brilliant man that wrote Nine, the musical Nine, Titanic, not Titanique, but Titanic, Grand Hotel, just brilliant. And he was just all over me, just with praise and, and attaboy, and this is great. And it literally restarted the pilot light of my creativity. And so, to your point, you took an incredible risk, and you kind of, well, look where you are now because of it. And I did it too. And I think that's, if your pilot light goes out, do the unexpected, push yourself, force yourself into a room that you've never been in, and you'll be shocked at what comes out.
Completely agree. And I feel like putting yourself out of your comfort zone a little and taking chances is huge. And one of your other pieces of advice is finding joy in the small everyday moments that we can often take for granted. And that really
Yeah,
aligned with how I try to live and spend every day, and it can often get difficult in the chaos of life. But how do you stop and take a moment and look at those small moments and really just savor them to feed your soul and fill your cup to put into your
yeah,
creativity?
yeah. It's it's really important. Most recently when I was in the rehearsal room at Monte Cristo, we were blessed to have a magnificent Broadway cast. And I'm telling you, we had world heavyweights. We had Norm Lewis, we had Sierra Boggess, we had Adam Jacobs, we had Karen Ziemba, we had, I mean, everyone there was just like, and I was sitting there at one moment, just watching them work so hard and so professionally and so earnestly. And I just sat there thinking, I am so blessed to be in this moment, in this room. And it made me realize that, you know, everyone goes for everyone kind of fantasizes success as kind of this long drawn out kind of red carpet of your life. And it's not that. It's these small moments. It's these moments that are important to you that you pick out and you say, okay, this is what it's about, right, for me. And that that's just really that it was a game changer for me to realize that. Like, wow, it's not about like this long red carpet. It's just these little moments of joy when you hear someone sing your songs. Because look, the critics are critics. They're going to make their own decisions, right? And audiences, Maury did teach me, audiences never lie. They'll tell you the truth. Critics may have a different opinion, but audiences never lie. But while you're still in the safety of the rehearsal room and you hear people singing stuff that was just in your head for that first time, man, that's a moment and that's a joy. So I would tell people, savor those small moments. You pick them out yourself. You know what's important to you, and savor those moments. And the rest is frosting and cherry on top.
There's so much of those moments that are the ones that stick with you. And really, part of the advice you've also shared is kind of taking solace in the development of work and in the process, which I've heard from some actors that they've had to learn to look at auditioning as part of the work, as part of the job, and just dive
Absolutely.
into that as opposed to being a space in between work. And for you,
Absolutely.
how does that apply with composing and creating music?
Yeah. Yeah. The best part of all of this is the writing of a show. That's where it's so invigorating. And if you talk to any writer, any of my colleagues or any writer, excuse me, for the theater, they will tell you the same thing. That's the fun part. The slog uphill is the marketing, is the hype, is the the financing and the business of it all, and of course, what happens after reviews and whether your show lives or doesn't live. But that moment, those 6 weeks of rehearsal and the 7 years before that when you're writing a show, because a show is 7 to 10 years. It's a long time. But that's the joy of trying things, of throwing things out, doing some readings, seeing what works. The development is what keeps you going, because with that development, the foundation of all that is hope, and hope springs eternal. And you walk away. There have been some rare moments, but moments when I'm at the piano and it's late at night and I write a song and I'm crying because I'm saying, "Oh my God, this is it. This is it." And I know that I've created something magical, and that's what I love. It's all the stuff that comes after. That's a little, that's harder, right? But development is the key, and that's why, as I think I've indicated to you in some of my thoughts previously, having a really healthy collaboration to sustain you for that 7 to 10 years is so critical, because you're married to that person for 7 to 10 years. And just like a marriage, so many things can go right and so many things can go wrong. So, um, but development is by far the most fun, and where your creative juices are allowed to flow unimpeded.
Which is also rare sometimes, depending on the production, depending on who you're working with and collaborating with. And like you said, collaboration
Yeah,
can vary, especially in this industry. And you have a great perspective on how vulnerable and emotional these connections can often be and the relationships you form. For you, what do you think makes those relationships work best when creating something? What do you think sometimes gets
yeah,
in the way?
yeah. Um, you really helped me think this through a little more clearly. I think that first and foremost, there has to be a certain level of trust. You have to trust that you're working with someone that respects you, that respects your work, that um, knows how to be honest without being mean or nasty or brutal. That's number one. Number two, this sounds weird because it sounds okay. The word that comes to mind is loyalty. And what I mean by that is that I don't know if you've ever been at a party where you're talking to somebody and they're not looking at you, but they're looking they're looking through you or looking around you, right? They're looking at the next person they can talk to, right? It's awful. It's a terrible feeling. It's like, wow, you really don't want to be here with me, right? Well, the competitive nature of our business and the the shifting sands of loyalty and opportunity that come sometimes between collaborators can be um, devastating, right? What's the metaphor? When an actor wins an Oscar and their spouse, who happens to be an actor, is next to them clapping with like a plastic smile, thinking, "Oh my God," and then you read 6 months later that they're no longer together because the competitive tensions and one kind of got ahead and one didn't. That can happen. That can happen if you're working with a really, really talented writer. Opportunities are going to come to them, and Not that they shouldn't take those opportunities, but there needs to be a modicum of loyalty so that they stick it out with you. And that can be, it can be weird if you know they are metaphorically looking at that party around you on either side or through you. And it can be weird. And then the third thing is commitment to the project, and an emotional and creative commitment to see this thing through and to be on the same page. That's really important, commitment and being on the same page, because you don't want to be writing different musicals. You want to be writing the same musical. And sometimes that takes a lot of creative verbal arm wrestling with your partner to make sure that you have the same vision. It's very interesting. Oscar Hammerstein writes, when they were starting out writing South Pacific, that he and Josh Logan, who was the director, and Richard Rodgers would meet in Bucks County, where I live. Hammerstein lives around 30 minutes from me, or lived. Um, his house is now the Hammerstein farm is now a museum. It's a protected museum. And Stephen Sondheim used to meet him at the fence, right? So Sondheim, the Butts County is just like chock full of phenomenal theatrical figures that started here. Anyway, they would meet at the Hammerstein farm, Rodgers, Logan, and Oscar Hammerstein. And for 9 months, they talked about what this show was about. They didn't write a note. They didn't write a lyric. They needed to make sure, because they based it on the Tales of the South Pacific by Mishner, which is really a series of short stories. So they extracted different plot lines from the different stories to forge the story of what became South Pacific. But that's my point. They were all on the same page. They weren't writing 3 different shows. And that's really important. And with that comes a commitment that we're all on the same page. We're all doing this together, and we're going to see it through. And so I think those are kind of the primary things I look for in a good collaboration. I will add one more thing, and that is, with commitment, follow through, and a sense of organization. The best collaborators I've ever worked with were actually very organized. And you need that sense of organization. If you're going to send a script to someone, you got to make sure that there are no typos and errors, and things are placed where they should be placed. And you need to meet deadlines, and you need to be, organized in that way. And I really appreciated that in lyricists and book writers that had that quality. So those would be the fundamental things: trust, loyalty, a commitment to each other, being on the same page, and writing the same show. And as I think I called it, relationship integrity. Kind of own your stuff, right? We all have stuff. We all have neuroses, and it's so easy to inject your emotional neuroses into this vulnerable, timid, creative marriage, just like you do in your marriage. And if you do, first of all, you better be aware of it. You need to own it, and you need to try to take that out, because it can destroy a collaboration. It can destroy a collaboration. If you expect them to be someone like, the dad you never had, or, or, something like that. That's not what this is about. That's not what this is about. At the end of the day, it is a business and creative partnership with certain boundaries. And so, own your emotional behaviors and insecurities, and be aware of them, and don't let them rule your partnership.
Yeah, I would think that's so vital and important with any collaboration and partnership. And I feel like it comes down to a balance and depending on who it is that you're working with too, because there's probably some collaborations that there's deep friendship there that's genuine outside of that project. And then there can be others that it's really just about the work. And maybe there isn't a deeper connection there.
And look, um, I'm really big on theater lore, and I've read a lot of the books. Right, Ro- uh, Hammerstein made Rodgers crazy because Hammerstein would spend 3 or 4 weeks on a lyric, and Rodgers would be sitting there just waiting, just waiting and waiting. And by the time he got the lyric, he literally would set songs in 5 minutes. He set Valley High in 5 minutes because he'd been waiting, and had been like, stewing in him, right? Lerner and Lowe had fist fights in the lobby during Brigadoon, right? They both were boxers in college, but they literally had fist fights. Gilbert and Sullivan hated each other. I mean, some of these legendary partnerships that we idolize, they were human. And, collaborations are hard. They're really hard. And look, Jerry Bach and Sheldon Harnick, who wrote Fiddler on the Roof, Fiorello, She Loves Me, some of the greatest musicals, ever. They didn't speak after the Rothschilds, their last show. They stopped talking. They stopped talking. They never went back to work with each other. Burt Bacharach and Hal David, legendary partnership. After Lost Horizon, the movie, which flopped, the movie musical, they never wrote again with each other. They had a rapprochement as they got older. They lived into their 90s, and I think they had some sort of relationship rapprochement. But what I'm saying is, everything I'm saying, this isn't easy. People think writing a musical is really easy. Try writing a musical. It is the hardest damn thing in the world, right? And part of that is process, the creative process that you have to have, as collaborators to get this done and see it to the finish line. That's why I said in some of my thoughts to you earlier, it's a miracle that anything gets on. It literally, when you go to Broadway and you see something, truly, I think, like, this is a miracle. Anything is a miracle that it gets on to Broadway. It's that hard.
Yeah, and there's two sides of that too with musical theater. There's something created from nothing but an idea and starting from scratch. And then there's the big commercial pieces for the stage. I mean, you got to work on Honeymooners, and that could also be overwhelming and sometimes feel like you are kind of anchored to something specific with this IP. And so I'm curious about your experience with working on something like that, and how important was it for you to keep focus on something specific so you weren't overwhelmed by the hugeness of it or feeling like you needed to somehow make it better.
Yeah. Well, look, every show has a story. Every show has a war story, and Honeymooners had its share. Um, I love the show dearly, and we had actually a fabulous run at Paper Mill. We really did. Um, Reviews were all over the place, but many, many, many positive reviews, and very strong reviews. It's kind of tragic that it never crossed the Hudson and the East River, but that's for another time. When I took on the Honeymooners, first of all, I'm old, but I'm not that old. I don't remember the Honeymooners, right? I don't remember that was even before my time, right? I was born in 1776, right? That was before my time. And so Bill Nuss and Dusty Kay, who were the book writers for Honeymooners, sent me the Classic 39. They sent me the Classic 39, and I watched them and I wept, and I thought, how am I ever going to do this? I mean, these are iconic. Jackie Gleason, Art Carney, Alice, Trixie. I mean, these are iconic people. And I felt overwhelmed, but Pete Mills, who was the lyricist, Pete Mills, who was a brilliant, brilliant writer in his own right, composer, lyricist, but took on the role as lyricist for Honeymooners. Pete was very encouraging and yeah, very supportive. And I would bring in stuff, and he would laugh and he'd say, "Yeah, let's try this or let's try that." And we had a blast writing it. Once we got into it, once we got over the psychological hurdle of I am writing for these classic people, you have to kind of cross that, and it's a leap of faith, and again, a belief in yourself, and finding what their musical voice is. And that, not just for Honeymooners, but for any show, it's finding their musical voice. When you can find their musical voice, then you're in. One of the things I worry about a little bit with some of the post-Sondheim modern composers of today is that they're more, sometimes I feel, this is very personal, that it's more about the beat than it is about the character, right? It's more about the beat and kind of the, a cool sound than it is about digging in and finding a character, you know? Again, I'll just, this popped into my mind. If you go back to a classic musical like a My Fair Lady, you can literally track Eliza Doolittle. You can track her musical arc from her I Want song, All I Want, to her anger, Just You Wait, and Re-Iggins, to her breakout moment, I Could Have Danced All Night, right? When, or the Rain in Spain triumphant, then I Could Have Danced All Night, right? And then Show Me Without You. Look at her arc. Look at her arc. And each song belongs in the Eliza Doolittle column of what her musical sound is, right? She's not Henry Igginsing it. She's not speak singing. She has her own unique musical voice. Stanley Holloway, right? The father, right? He has his own musical voice. Rex Harrison has his own musical voice, right? And I think sometimes that's getting lost in today's theater. We're losing that, and we're going more towards kind of a, well, it's a cool beat, right? But are we really kind of picking up who it is? Now, and I'll tell you what, in Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton has a musical voice. You can hear it, right? You can hear it. He has his I Want song, My Shot. You can hear it. You can track it, right? That's brilliant. So I'm not saying it, I don't want to make it a blanket statement, but I think there are some shows where that's getting lost. And it's because I don't think some of the writers have been schooled in the kind of musical theater craft that they need to be schooled in. So they're just writing what they know versus writing what might be a better sculpted song or character. That being said, I think that was the key for Pete and I with Honeymooners, is when we found the voice of these characters, then we just had a blast writing the show, and we wrote a lot. We must have written, oh my God, I could check with Pete, at least 7 opening numbers. We wrote our heads off. I mean, that's the other thing. People don't realize how hard it is, right? You, as Maury used to teach at BMI, the art of writing is rewriting. And it was a joy. It was a joy. The Honeymooners also went through extensive development. We had something like 5 or 6 readings. We had a major workshop. It was just an absolute joy to write. I'm sorry that audiences couldn't enjoy it on Broadway. Maybe one day, who knows? But it was a joy to write.
Yeah, and it sounds like the magic was in the process, like you were saying. I mean, I think there's something beautiful in that.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing I will say is there are certain shows that teach you how to write for stars. And in Honeymooners, our star was Michael McGraw, who tragically left us and died way too soon. And he was Ralph Crampton. He was brilliant, brilliant. And he had won a Tony the year before for Nice Work If You Could Get It. And Michael's vocal range was limited. And so I had to learn how to write. Once I knew his vocal range, I could go back to the piano and I could start writing songs where I knew he had this limited vocal range, right? And I couldn't have him going, from he couldn't do that. That wasn't him. And you just learn that stuff. In the meantime, our Alice was the magnificent Leslie Kritzer. And Leslie Kritzer has an instrument from God. I mean, her voice is incredible. And we were missing Alice in Act Two, and I suggested that we write a song for her. And it needed to be something, because remember, the Honeymooners is in the 1950s. So I wrote kind of a song that allowed her to scat in the middle. And I got so excited when I started writing it. I grabbed her from rehearsal. We went into another room. I played some of it. She starts to get excited. I grabbed Pete, and it was one of those MGM moments. We literally wrote a song called A Woman's Work in around 5 minutes. And then we did it in the final workshop. People cheered, and every night it stopped the show at Paper Mill. Every night. I mean, it was just glorious. And so, again, I knew that we were underutilizing Leslie's gift, and we had to give her something that just blew the roof off. And we did. So it was a great experience.
It's beautiful to hear, and it shows just the different types of experiences you can have within that space. I mean, you describe yourself as being creatively ambidextrous in how you approach something, and it shows that, depending on the situation, depending on what inspires you in that moment, it could always look
Yeah.
very different. How do you think that has helped you in your process, being able to kind of just adjust and adapt to whatever situation you're in?
Yeah. I think it's made me a better partner and collaborator for the folks that I work with, because they feel secure because they know that I can handle whatever they need. If it's music first, like for instance, just today, I sent Pete Kellogg an idea for a song for Monte Cristo in our rewrites. That's music first, and he loved it. He said, "Well, I actually wrote a lyric out for that moment." I said, "Well, send it to me, and I'll set it, and we'll see which is better." And so there's some most I'd say most composers that I know are usually lyric first, but um part of it is my OCD, my ADHD, whatever. But when I was working on the Hudsucker Proxy with Glenn Slater, I literally would send that poor man like 10 songs for 10 tunes for one spot. And he loved it. He loved it. And Glenn was so, brilliantly adept at, teasing out one of the numbers. And he says, "This is it. This is it." Now, once that happened, I would give him that musical sketch, that musical idea, and then we can kind of work it together, right? He might send me a bridge lyric and I could set that to whatever I sent him. So it becomes kind of like making a cake. Someone needs it and then someone puts the salt in, and you know what I mean? It's whatever. I know how to make a cake, but it someone has to start it. And so I'm a good starter when it comes to music. And if someone gives me lyric first, that's not a problem. I can do that too. And in fact, for the Rivals, when Pete and I wrote the Rivals, Pete Kellogg and I, there was one song in the Rivals that I wrote that was very classical, because my first idea was, well, this is a classic English farce from 1776, right? So maybe I'll kind of try a classic thing. And then, over time, it just wasn't staying right in my head and his. And so I said, fine, give me the lyric again. Gave me the lyric, and I rewrote the lyric to a different tune. And that's sometimes what you got to do. Um, and I would add that to the list with collaboration and relationship integrity, which is you need to be flexible. You need to be able to give up your young. And that is something that young writers do not do very well. Um, You need to be able to let go. When you hit that rehearsal room, your show is now their show. And they may come to you and say, hey, this bridge isn't working, or this isn't working, or can we change that? Or can we, do something here differently with the melody? And you need to be able to go, huh, okay, maybe that was, something that you adored. But if the director comes to you and has a conference and sits down and says, listen, this isn't working the way you wrote it, can we change it? You need to be able to do that. So you need to be able to give up your young and make it theirs, because they're the ones that are going to be singing it and doing that show every night for 8 performances a week. So,
I think that's not only so important in any type of collaboration to make something work, but it's funny as you were describing it, I was thinking how it's a good metaphor for parenting also. And
oh yeah,
I'm a recent parent. I have a 9-month-old, and so I can only imagine how much you are a starter for your kids. You have a lot of pride in your kids, and your oldest daughter, Marla, smashing it as Celine Dion in Titanique,
yes,
which she also helped
yes,
create. And that's been a long journey, I know, 10 years. And it's evident
yes,
you and your wife really inspired her start. I mean, surrounding her, immersing her in musical theater.
yeah,
And so, how does it feel to just take in all the success that's she's feeling this year, and the Tony
yeah.
nominations and the performance that they're going to do and everything?
It's indescribable. Look, you're a parent, and I don't care whether your kid's up the bat and hits a single and you go, yeah, right? Or, they're in the school play or whatever their accomplishment is. That moment when you're watching your child achieve something, only a parent understands what that feels like, right? It's indescribable pride, right? It's bigger than you. And, you know, we have watched Marla kind of chase her dream ever since she was a little girl. I mean, this was the kid that won the first grade talent show. She went to states in high school, when people were gobsmacked when she sang. I mean, she's always been a little bit of a powerhouse in that field. Um, and so we've had many occasions to kind of cheer her on. Um, and certainly in uh, the Broadway arena, uh, I'll share a quick dad story. So Marla did The Drowsy Chaperone. That was her first real professional gig, national tour for a year. And she was great in that. And she played Kitty. And then she got into the replacement track for one of the nurses for South Pacific in Lincoln Center. Great. She's a nurse. She jogged on. She sang I'm in Love with a Wonderful Guy with all of that. That was wonderful. It was a glorious production. But then she got Sister Act, and she was the shy nun with the big voice, Sister Mary Robert. And she didn't tell us this. She didn't tell us this. So we go to a preview. I had no clue. None. Act 2, she sings this song called The Life I Never Led. She's all alone on the stage, and she's singing this gorgeous song and belting her face off. And I started to weep. I just it that that was the first moment where, you're seeing your child and she's the only one on stage and, singing this song. And that's when it really hit me like, oh my God, this is like my daughter's on Broadway, even though she had been. My daughter's on Broadway and she's like singing this song and people are cheering at the end. And I started to weep. And then the person back of me goes like this. And I turn around and the person says, "Is that your daughter?" I said, "Yes." And it's like, oh my God. I just kind of, my emotions took over me. And I hope that happens to you with your kids, that, you watch them achieve and accomplish, and there's nothing like it. And of course, now with Titanique, it's like, well, this is like other galaxy, this is other galaxy. And so we are very, very proud of her and impressed, awed, gobsmacked, excited, thrilled. I could go through the lexicon of adjectives. It's been an amazing time for our family. We're all going to be there for the Tony Awards. Marla asked me to sit next to her, which I'm nervous about because I don't want to. I don't want to start bleeding and crying again like a baby. But it's really kind of a circle of life moment for me as a dad. And the two of us have this kinship of understanding what it is to write and to be a part of this industry. And I know, I know what it means to have that show on Broadway and what it took. Maybe more than the average bear, you know? And so I can't tell you how thrilled we are. And by the way, Connie, her co-star, Constantine Rizzoli, it's like my adopted son. I love Connie. I love Ty. I love Eva. Leighton, John Riddle. You know, I know these people. They're like our extended family now, and we've been all together on this journey, really. And Connie's mom, Penny, and Ty's mom, Rhonda. We literally are like groupies. We went to London together for the opening there. We went to Paris together for the opening there. It's insane. So it's like we've become this extended family, and I adore them all. And hats off to them for what they've accomplished. And of course, regardless of what happens, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I think they've already won. Just being at the St. James, you know, they won. So I'm overwhelmed, as
Absolutely.
is my wife, Rita,
There's so much
as
magic
is Rita.
about that show and your family and your experience and the fact that you get to share that understanding of what the experience is like. And I think it's amazing
Yeah,
when that happens with anyone, just that human connection. But when it's a parent and child, it's even more special.
yeah,
And I'll definitely be looking out
yeah.
for you because I'll be watching the Tonys on that day. I'm very
Good,
excited for the
good.
whole
You'll see
team.
me. You'll see Marla, not me, hopefully. But I did want to say that we had this moment of crossover where Monte Cristo was previewing at the York Theater off Broadway. Marla was previewing at Titanique. So the only time she could come to see Monte Cristo was on a Sunday evening. We did like a Sunday night performance, and because she was in tech. And it was really special, you know, and she came on stage to say hi to all the actors. And it was really, it was a lovely, special moment. And I do want to do a very selfish and quick shout out that Monte Cristo, we are at the beginning of our trajectory and we have high hopes for the show's future. And it was probably one of the happiest and most fulfilling creative experiences of all my shows. Um, and so I hope that we can see the light of day in another production somewhere.
Same. I'm definitely going to be following along because I'm excited for you and everything you've been working on over the years, and now you're so passionate about what you're doing and creating, and it just goes to show also that the magic that you are experiencing with creating is continuing. And you put a
Thank
lot of
you.
magic into your life, into your work, and just how you talk about it, and it's beautiful to see.
Thank you.
And that leads me to my last two questions, which is where do you find magic in the world, and how do you hope to create magic for others?
Where do I find magic in the world? As I get older, it's everywhere I look. I I I literally get up every day and I thank God that I'm here to see another day. And when I go outside and I see a blue sky or or the sun or the trees dappling in the breeze, you know, I'm very thankful for the little things. I'm thankful for friendships that have stood by me. I know I sound like very new aging and all that stuff, but I really am. I'm really thankful for the smaller things in life, and I find magic in all of that. And I stop now and I register it more because there's going to be a day where I won't be able to do that. And I I find magic in treasuring family, and I'm a bit of the family historian. I've written a lot about my mom's experiences as a child of a in the Holocaust. Um, I do a lot of speaking on that to middle schools and high schools and elementary schools, and I wrote a book about her experiences. We found 25 letters that were smuggled by the underground to her family because she hid away from them when she was 12 because it was safer to be apart. I recently found 540 love letters that my parents wrote to each other when she had to go back to Belgium after her visa was up, and I dictated them, and that became my brother's birthday gift. So I I find magic in not just appreciating life and nature, but I think the way I'll end it is to say I find magic in giving to others, in in making other people feel happy, inspired, and giving back. And I think as I get older too, I think giving back is really important. And when I do a presentation to 400 seventh graders about my mom's story, and I end by telling them this is now, my mom's story is now your story, you see the recognition on their face. That's really special. So I think that's kind of where magic is for me. And of course, when I write a new song, that's always magic. And giving my art and giving my music to audiences is something that is also giving back. And so that's kind of where I know I'm all over the place with that answer, but that's kind of where I would be.
No, that's beautiful because it answers both questions. It also answers how you hope to create magic for others. And I think you find the magic in creating magic for others, which is a beautiful thing.
Well,
Uh,
I didn't think of it that way, but that's a beautiful way to summarize it.
and I think you're very successful in it. I think it goes to show just your long career, and I think your talented family, and I think just
Thank
the
you.
fact that you are still creating beautiful works and continuing to collaborate with others. So, Stephen, I want to thank you so much for coming on and getting to pick your brain because I just love your perspective on all things creative and the world and hearing your advice. I think is very important. So, thank you for coming.
Well, thank you. And it's been a real privilege and a real honor. First, not just to get to know you, and I hope we can continue our relationship, but if I can be of any help or inspiration to those who are listening, then that's a good thing. And I'm happy I was able to do that. So thank you for letting me have a voice now
Of
in this.
course, I'd love the same thing. And I normally end by telling everyone out there to go and make some magic. But I would love for you to just say your name and say, everyone listening, go out there and do some magic.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Stephen Weiner. And please go out there in the world and do your magic.
You heard him. And follow Stephen online. I'll drop the links below. Till next time, everyone.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Matt.